Hey everybody, I'm James Skitchy Zimmers from the PRS Tech Center. I'm here today to take you through a start-to-finish setup on our flagship model, the Custom 24, so that it plays great, sounds great, and stays in tune like it should. Before we jump into this setup, let's go over the tools that we recommend using. First up is the PRS and MusicNomad Toolkit for any mechanical adjustments we have. This kit was developed specifically for PRS guitars, so you have everything you need for any PRS guitar, no matter which series. And for our other measurements, we're using this precision feeler gauge set. This will allow us to dial in measurements for neck relief, string action, fingerboard and string radius, and nut height. Alongside that, we have a few support tools to make this process even easier. A stable work surface and neck support, a string winder with built-in string cutter, microfiber cloth, cleaning tools and a general purpose guitar cleaner, and fretboard conditioner. And finally, here are a few setup essentials. A fresh set of strings, optional bridge support for tremolo guitars, a capo, feeler gauges, a machinist rule marked in 30 seconds or a string action gauge, a collection of nut files, and a precision tuner. This collection of tools gives you everything you need to go from a basic restring to a tour-ready machine. Alright, let's dive in. Before I make any adjustments, I like to do a quick visual inspection of the guitar. Yes, even my own personal guitars. I'm looking for dirt, grime, wear, any broken or loose parts. Once we've taken a look at it and addressed any of those issues, we're ready to start cleaning our guitars. First, let's carefully remove the strings. If you have a trem-equipped guitar, you'll want to put a business card under the back of the bridge to stop the bridge from resting directly on the surface of the finish. Then, with your guitar neck supported, you'll want to slowly loosen the strings, snip them, and safely remove them and set them aside for recycling. When removing strings, it is not necessary to fully remove the thumb screws. You can loosen them and leave them in place so it's easier when reinstalling your fresh strings later on. If you have an unfinished fretboard, like a rosewood, ebony, or zero coat, we will want to start with a guitar cleaner and a microfiber cloth and wipe away any dirt or grime. Once you're happy with how clean it is, apply a small amount of fretboard conditioner and let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes across the entire fretboard. Once it has had time to soak in and absorb the oils, wipe away any excess. Remember, you only have to do this about every 6 months. If you have a finished fretboard, like maple, you would just use the microfiber cloth and guitar cleaner to wipe it off. While we're here, let's go ahead and wipe down the body, neck, and hardware of the instrument as well. Starting with a clean instrument gives us a better chance of finding any unusual issues before they arise later on. Now, we are ready to restring. You are more than welcome to use any strings you like, but say we are using PRS Signature 10 to 46. These are the same strings that will come on your guitar from the PRS factory. As you string your guitar, you will want to leave about 1.5 inches or 2 vertical fingers worth of slack before you tighten down your locks. For a guitar like this one that has locking tuners, you will want to insert your string through the tuner, lock it down using the thumb screw, and you'll want to end up with about 1/2 to 3/4 of a turn around the guitar tuning peg. You want to make sure that your wraps travel down the post and that your strings are towards the center of the headstock. Once everything is installed, tune your guitar to pitch. Switch to the neck pickup and roll the tone back slightly. Doing so will help your tuner focus on the root note and won't have it chasing overtones. Now that you're tuned up, comes an often forgotten but important step, stretching your strings. This is critical not only to a proper setup, but to make sure that your guitar holds tune properly. One at a time, pull the strings upwards and gently work up and down the length of the string. Once you have stretched your strings, you will want to tune back the pitch and repeat this process until your guitar does not fall out of tune. Now that we've installed our strings, it's time to move on to neck relief. Inside the neck of your guitar is a truss rod. On modern PRS guitars, this is a double-acting truss rod, which means it can compensate for forward and backward bows due to string tension or environmental changes. Before you adjust anything, it's important to know what you're looking for. If your guitar has too much forward bow, you will see extra clearance in the middle of the neck, higher action, and bouncier strings the higher you play. If the neck is too straight or has back bow, you'll find buzzing in the lower registers, and you'll find yourself having higher action than you want to compensate for that buzz. To do a quick rough check of your relief, do as follows. Fret the first fret and the last fret while you're in playing position. Use your pinky to bounce the string around the middle of the neck. If you have a lot of bounce, you may be looking at excessive front bow. If you have no bounce at all, your neck may be too straight if not moving into back bow. The way to dial in your actual measurement is to capo the guitar at the first fret, fret the guitar at the last fret on the low E, and check the gap using your feeler gauges right around the 7th fret. You'll want your 0.006 inch feeler gauge to slide in without touching. Your 10,000ths feeler gauge should slide in and touch the string. If that's the case, you're within spec. There's also an 0.008 of an inch feeler gauge that can help you dial in exactly how much relief you want. If there's too much gap, you'll want to tighten your truss rod. You would do that by placing the truss rod wrench on the truss rod nut and pulling it towards you, thereby pulling the headstock back and straightening the neck out. Once you have done that adjustment, you'll want to check your relief again. If there is no gap, you'll want to loosen your truss rod to create some forward bow in your guitar. To do that, you would place your truss rod wrench on the truss rod nut and push it away from you, thereby pushing the headstock slightly further out and creating some forward bow. You will want to take your time here, making small adjustments and rechecking after each one. PRS truss rods are known for the responsiveness, so you should be able to make sweeping adjustments without having to force anything. This adjustment affects action, tuning, and intonation, so you will want to retune after you make an adjustment, and this is a foundational step in a great setup. Once your action is set where you like it, make sure you retune the guitar and we're ready to move on to the next step. Now it's time to move on to checking our nut height. Your nut height has a huge effect on how your guitar feels in the lower positions, your intonation, and tuning. At the first fret, you're generally looking for about 20,000ths on the low E string, about 18,000ths through the middle strings, and 16,000ths on the high string. We are going to measure our nut height in playing position by taking our nut height feeler gauges and sliding them above the first fret and under the string. You'll know you're at height when your feeler gauge just barely slips between the two. If the nut is too high, your guitar will feel very stiff in the first few positions, and you'll have some tuning issues because you will be stretching the string further than you need to get the note to fret. If your nut is cut too low, you'll have some open string buzzing. It is important to set your neck relief before you start checking your nut height because a neck relief can also lead to the same symptoms. If you need to lower a nut slot, file carefully and in small increments. You want to use a nut file size that is about 3,000ths larger than the string you are using. Work slowly and recheck your heights often. While we are working on nut height, it is a good time to check for binding in your nut slots. The easiest way to check is to slowly pull a string out of the slot and listen for a ping or a click. If you hear that click, it means that you are binding in the nut slot, which can cause tuning instabilities, especially with a tremolo guitar. The way to fix that is to take a nut file slightly larger than your string and very lightly file it out, let the string sit in there, and pull it back out again to check. Once you no longer hear the click or ping, you know that your string is no longer binding in the slot. If you have moved to a heavier gauge string than what came stock on your PRS guitar, you'll want to use an appropriate nut slot file size to open the nut slot up so that your string can rest properly in the nut. Now that we have a fresh set of strings, properly set relief, and we've checked our nut slot, it's time to move on to action. To measure and set our string action, we will want to have the guitar in playing position, and we will be measuring from the bottom of the string to the top of the 12th fret. A good PRS bass line, and the starting point for our setup, is 2 32nds of an inch between the top of the fret and the bottom of the high E, and 2.5 32nds between the top of the 12th fret and the bottom of the low E, with a gradual graduation between the two. On a tremolo-equipped guitar, like this Custom 24, we want to make sure we are using the saddle height screws to adjust our action and not the pivot screws. This is very important. The pivot screws have to be set level for your guitar to hold tune. The saddle height screws are where we set our actual string action. To measure and adjust your string action, I'm going to use the 30 seconds edge of the string action gauge, set it on top of the 12th fret, and I want that high E string to cut the 2 30-second line in half. When measuring the low E side, I want to see the line and just a touch of black over top of it. When you do have to adjust your action, as I said before, use the saddle height adjustment screws and make sure you keep your saddles parallel to the bridge plate. You want a smooth stair-step pattern across your bridge. You don't want your saddles leaning at odd angles. For detailed instructions on how to adjust other bridge types, please see the customer service section of the PRS Guitars website. Once you're set up to PRS baseline specs, this is a point where you can start to personalize your setup. You can play around with your heights as long as you keep them in a gentle graduation until it feels comfortable in your hands. Your guitar should play cleanly, feels comfortable, and does not fight you. Now that we have our action dialed in, let's go ahead and start adjusting our pickup heights. Believe it or not, pickup height has a real effect on your tone. If your pickups are closer to the strings, you'll get more output, but the top end can get harsh and the low end can get a little muddy or woofy. If your pickups are too far away, your tone can get a little thin and you can lose some of the body of the guitar. First thing we're going to do is set the bridge pickup height. Then we will adjust the neck pickup height by ear until we dial in the sound that we're after. This is another area where you can really personalize the sound of your guitar by adding and subtracting height from either side, tilting a pickup, or even dialing in individual strings. To measure and set the height on our pickups, we're going to fret the last fret on the low and high E string. Then we will use the 30 seconds part of our string action gauge to measure from the top of the pickup to the bottom of the string. We're looking for about 2.5 30 seconds on the high E side and about 3.5 30 seconds on the low E side. This is for humbucker equipped guitars. If you're using a single coil equipped guitar, please see the measurements on the customer service section of the PRS Guitars website. That being said, the goal is really the same: balanced output and a good, even, consistent tone. To check and adjust your pickup height, you'll want your guitar in playing position. You'll want to fret the last fret on the E and the E string. Then take the part of the string action gauge labeled pickup height, which is labeled in 30 seconds of an inch, and measure from the top of the pickup to the bottom of the string. You're looking for about 2.5 on the treble side of the treble pickup and about 3.5 on the bass side of the treble pickup. PRS stock specs are 3.5 on the treble side of the bass pickup and 4.5 on the bass side of the bass pickup. Now, all of these specs can be adjusted to taste and may vary depending on what kind of amp and setup you're running into. If you're working on a guitar that has any other types of PRS pickups, please see the customer service section of prsguitars.com for suggested pickup heights for that model. On piezo-equipped PRS guitars, inside the battery compartment, there are 6 individual string outputs plus a 7th overall output for the piezo system. These are set at the factory and should not need adjustment. Now we'll set the intonation. This is one of the last steps of the setup because it depends on the nut being the right height, the relief being set properly, what action you are using, making sure that the strings are stable and stay in tune, and even the pickup heights can have an effect on this. To start setting our intonation, let's have the guitar in playing position, plugged into a tuner, switch to the neck pickup, and roll the tone back slightly. Doing so will help your tuner focus on the root note and won't have it chasing overtones. One by one, tune your open string and then press down on the 12th fret with your playing pressure. This is important because if you press lightly during your intonation setup and then you play with a heavy hand, you'll be out of tune across the guitar neck. Now compare your fretted note to the open note. If your fretted note is flat, move your saddle forward towards the headstock. If your fretted note is sharp, move the saddle back towards the tailpiece. Once you have made that adjustment, retune your string and check it again. You'll repeat this process string by string until all of your fretted 12th fret notes are in tune with your open strings. As a general visual check, your saddles should have a nice stair-step pattern, assuming you're using a standard gauge of string. If you're using an alternate tuning or an alternate set of string gauges, you may see some discrepancies, but it should follow a logical pattern. That was a full PRS setup from start to finish. Make small adjustments, take your time, and you'll have a great playing and sounding guitar. For more setup and maintenance tips and tricks, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. For all things PRS guitars, please visit us at prsguitars.com. Thank you for watching.